Welcome! Do you want to learn English in a fun and easy way? In this video, we teach English using narrated, animated stories. Here is how it works. On the left, watch the beautiful animations. They are designed to help you understand and enjoy the story. On the right, you can read along as you listen to the narrator. When we reach a difficult word, don't worry. A box will appear at the bottom with a simple definition and an example to help you learn. Let's get started.
It was a very quiet night, just after midnight. The date was April 26th, 1986. At precisely 1:23 a.m., this one moment changed everything. It split time into a before and an after for many across the world. In a remote corner of northern Ukraine, a large industrial complex stood silently under the stars. The Vladimir I. Lenin nuclear power station. Deep inside, a team of workers was conducting a routine safety test on reactor number 4. It was a technical procedure, usually quite boring, designed to make sure the plant was safe. No one could have imagined that this ordinary test would quickly spiral out of control. It turned into the worst civilian nuclear disaster in all of human history. Suddenly, with no warning, an immense, violent explosion ripped through the building. The noise was deafening, a roar that shook the very ground. The blast was so incredibly powerful that it tore the massive 1,000-ton lid right off the top of reactor number 4. This was a catastrophic event, far worse than any accident. It immediately sent an invisible but extremely deadly plume of radioactive material high into the dark Ukrainian sky. This dangerous cloud began to drift silently, carrying its poison far away across the land. Inside the control room, the plant operators watched in shock. Their faces were pale, their hearts beating fast, as they stared at the strange flashing lights and impossible readings on their instruments.
A terrifying truth slowly became clear to them. The very heart of the power station, the reactor core itself, was gone. It had been completely destroyed by the explosion. They understood the horror of what had happened. The reactor was open to the world. They quickly reported this terrible news to the senior staff, the plant's upper management. But the managers struggled to accept it. They were in denial. They simply could not believe such an impossible accident had truly occurred. This strong refusal to face the clear reality of the disaster would trigger a deadly series of bad decisions and hidden truths, setting the stage for even greater tragedy in the days and weeks to come. A city of hope. Pripyat was a modern Soviet city designed to showcase progress and a bright future. Around 50,000 people lived there, right next to the powerful nuclear plant that powered the region. Built in the 1970s, Pripyat housed the plant's workers and their families. It quickly became a model city, symbolizing Soviet scientific power and ambition to the world. Residents felt very safe, placing absolute trust in their country's advanced technology. The nuclear plant was seen as a source of national pride, not danger for its citizens. Life in Pripyat was vibrant and full of daily activity. The city was home to many young families, eager to build new lives. People were relatively prosperous by Soviet standards, enjoying uncommon amenities.
Children attended modern schools and parks. Large swimming pools offered recreation, and cultural centers provided entertainment. A brand new fun fair with a Ferris wheel stood ready for joyous occasions. It would tragically never be used. There was a palpable feeling of optimism among the citizens. They felt proud to live near such an important and prestigious industrial enterprise. They imagined bright futures for their children, trusting in Soviet science. However, just a few kilometers away, a dangerous machine operated, hidden from their daily view. The days leading up to the disaster were peaceful for Pripyat's residents, standing in stark contrast to the events unfolding at the plant. On April 25th, a special safety test was scheduled at reactor number 4. This test, meant to improve safety, would instead lead to unforeseen complications and crucial delays. While plant workers prepared for this complex and risky procedure, life in Pripyat continued without a hint of the impending catastrophe. As night fell quietly on April 25th, the people of Pripyat went to sleep, dreaming of the next day. They were blissfully unaware that the very air they would breathe tomorrow morning, the air in their beloved city, would be forever poisoned by an invisible, deadly enemy. The big mistake. How did an impossible explosion happen inside the control room? The chain of events that precipitated the disaster began much earlier than the explosion itself.
It started with a planned safety test. Workers at the Chernobyl plant were trying to check how the reactor would cool down during an accident where all outside power was lost. This test had been scheduled for some time. On April 25th, the day before the disaster, they started to slowly lower the reactor's power. By midday, it had reached about 50% of its nominal energy level of 3,200 megawatts. The test was supposed to happen that afternoon at 2:15 p.m. However, another power station in the Kiev area suddenly stopped working. At 2 o'clock, the Kiev electrical grid controller asked Chernobyl to postpone the test. They needed Chernobyl's power to meet the high demand in the evening. This delay, a simple change for grid management, had very deep consequences. When the test finally restarted, it was late at night, during the new shift. The operators were working outside their area of special expertise, and they were very tired. They made several dangerous mistakes. They turned off important power regulating systems and its emergency safety systems. They also pulled out almost all the control rods from the reactor's core. They let the reactor keep running at a very low power, about 7%. These errors, added to others, made the reactor highly unstable. The Soviet RBMK reactor had a hidden design flaw, a secret known only in classified documents. This flaw was called a positive void coefficient.
It meant that at low power, if the water inside the reactor turned into steam, the chain reaction would actually speed up instead of slowing down. This made the reactor a ticking time bomb under certain conditions. Other, safer reactor designs would behave the opposite way. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26th, the chain reaction in the core began to spin out of control. The operators saw the power rising very fast. In a heart-pounding moment, they pressed the AZ5 emergency shutdown button. They hoped this would stop the reaction. Tragically, they did not know that this very action, combined with the reactor's design flaw and their earlier mistakes, would make the reaction accelerate. The reactor's power surged exponentially in just seconds. This led to a catastrophic blast that blew off the heavy lid of the reactor, leaving the core open to the world. 4. The brave men. The explosion happened, and soon help arrived. Local firefighters rushed to the Chernobyl plant, unaware of the real danger. They saw fires on the roof and around the building. They thought it was a normal industrial fire. These brave men put on their standard protective gear, which was wholly inadequate for the situation. As they fought the raging flames, something was terribly wrong. Many of them tasted something strange in their mouths, like metal. They felt a warm, tingling sensation on their skin. These were the first undeniable signs of the lethal radiation they were receiving.
The invisible enemy was everywhere, silently attacking their bodies. They were getting doses that could kill them, yet they continued their duty. One fireman later remembered making a dark joke to his comrades. "There must be an incredible amount of radiation here. We'll be lucky if we're all still alive in the morning." Despite knowing the risks, they felt a moral obligation to fight the fires. The immediate priority was to extinguish the fires on the roof and the areas around reactor number 3. By 5 in the morning, these fires were finally put out. But a far more serious threat remained. The fire inside reactor number 4's core continued to burn intensely. This was not just any fire. It was the highly radioactive graphite that made up the reactor, burning at extremely high temperatures. This ongoing fire presented a new, terrifying scenario. The molten nuclear fuel was burning downward through the concrete floor of the reactor building. It was threatening to reach a basement filled with water directly below. If the superheated, melted core made contact with this water, it would cause a massive steam explosion. Such an event would throw even more deadly radioactive material high into the air, making the disaster far worse and potentially spreading contamination across a vast area of Europe. To prevent this greater catastrophe, 3 brave men stepped forward for a critical and incredibly dangerous mission.
They had to go into the dark, flooded basement, where the water itself was highly radioactive. Their task was to open special drainage valves to empty the water from the basement. These heroes, later called the Suicide Squad for their incredible courage, entered the deadly environment without hesitation. They succeeded in their mission. They found the valves, opened them, and the water in the basement began to drain away. Their heroic action prevented the feared steam explosion. However, the crisis was not truly over. The fire inside the reactor's graphite core continued to burn, still a silent threat. It now risked melting even deeper through the Earth itself and contaminating the entire regional groundwater supply, which would have long-lasting and severe consequences for millions. 5. The secret. The Soviet government's first reaction to the Chernobyl accident was to hide the truth. This was a common way for them to deal with problems. They had a long history of concealment, keeping bad news from their own people and the world. After the explosion, they quickly cut telephone lines in the area. They told everyone that nothing serious had happened, denying the terrible reality. They believed that admitting a mistake would make their country look weak. This decision to lie put millions of their own citizens in extreme danger. On Saturday, April 26th, the day after the explosion, the people of Pripyat woke up to a normal-looking spring morning.
They lived just a few kilometers from the plant. They did not know about the invisible, deadly particles drifting from the damaged reactor number 4. Children played outside, couples walked in parks, and an outdoor wedding was even celebrated. Life continued as usual. Meanwhile, behind closed doors,
officials were having urgent meetings. They were debating how to respond and whether to tell the public or to order an evacuation. But they chose to keep this crucial information secret. The residents were left to breathe radioactive air, completely unaware of the poison around them. However, the invisible danger could not be contained by borders or Soviet secrecy. 2 days later, on April 28th, something important happened far away. In Sweden, special machines at monitoring stations began to detect abnormally high levels of radiation in the air. The wind had carried the radioactive cloud thousands of miles across Europe. The Swedish government was worried and demanded an explanation from Moscow. At first, the Soviet government was reluctant to admit anything. They tried to minimize the problem. But with clear evidence from other countries, they could no longer hide the truth. Moscow was forced to announce to the world that an accident had happened at Chernobyl. The admission led to a rapidly ordered evacuation of Pripyat.
On April 27th, buses arrived, and the 30,000 inhabitants were told to take only essential belongings for a temporary 3-day trip. Many left behind their photos, their pets, and their entire lives, believing they would soon return, but they never did. The bustling city of Pripyat became a silent ghost town in just a few hours. This delayed truth and the government's lies ignited a powerful spark of outrage among citizens. It showed them that their own government did not care for their safety. This anger began to weaken the entire Soviet Empire, helping to tear it down from within. 6. The bad cloud. After the explosion at reactor number 4, an invisible poison spread quickly. This bad cloud did not care about countries or borders. The wind carried radioactive dust and tiny particles far away from Chernobyl. It traveled over Ukraine, Belarus, and then continued into Western Europe, touching many nations. This invisible danger fell onto crops and fields, mixed with rainwater, and landed on animals that people kept for food. Millions of acres of land, forests, and farms became unsafe for years. Many dangerous elements were released into the air during the accident. Most of these elements were short-lived and quickly disappeared. But some stayed in the environment for a very long time, like cesium-137 and strontium-90. These elements contaminated the soil and water for decades, making them a threat. Another dangerous element was iodine-131.
Although it only lasted about 8 days, it was especially harmful. People, particularly children, drank milk from cows that had eaten grass contaminated with iodine-131. This caused the radioactive iodine to enter their bodies and gather in their thyroid glands, leading to serious health issues. By the year 2005, over 6,000 cases of thyroid cancer were found among children and teenagers who were exposed to this contaminated milk in Belarus, Ukraine, and nearby Russian regions. It is likely that many of these thyroid cancers were directly caused by absorbing radioiodine. The accident hurt people in ways that were not always visible. Beyond the physical sickness, many survivors felt much fear and hopelessness. They lived with a feeling called paralyzing fatalism. This psychological toll led to mental health problems. Residents reported feeling sick, had negative thoughts about their health, and worried about short lives. The invisible danger made them feel sad, anxious, and dependent on others, sometimes even making them feel like invalids, even without strong physical signs. The Chernobyl disaster caused deep emotional and mental wounds that were in many ways as damaging as the physical harm. Even decades later, there is still much disagreement about the total number of deaths from Chernobyl. The true death toll remains very contentious. Different scientific groups and environmental organizations have very different numbers. For example, the United Nations said that apart from about 5,000 thyroid cancers, which caused 15 deaths, there was no clear sign of a big health problem from radiation after 20 years. However, a 2006 study by the World Health Organization estimated 9,000 cancer-related deaths in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Other groups like Greenpeace have given much higher estimates, suggesting nearly 100,000 deaths. This wide difference in numbers shows how difficult it is to truly know the full impact of the disaster. It is hard to separate the effects of radiation from other problems like poverty or poor health care. Will humanity ever uncover the real number of lives stolen by this invisible disaster? The debate continues. 7. The empty city. Imagine a city where every single person disappeared overnight. Pripyat is that city. After the terrible accident, all 50,000 residents had to leave very quickly. They were told it was only for 3 days, and they should bring only important things. But they never came back. Now the city stands like a frozen picture from the past. Empty apartment buildings reach towards the sky, and trees grow through the floors and walls. In old classrooms, rotting textbooks lie open on desks. The famous Fun Fair's Ferris wheel, never used even once, stands still and rusty, a sad symbol of the sudden abandonment.
It is a haunting picture of what happens when a modern city becomes completely empty, a true archaeological ruin of recent history. But something very surprising happened in this empty city. Nature began to take over. The exclusion zone, a large area where humans are not allowed to live, became an unexpected home for many wild animals. Wolves now walk freely on the old city streets. Brown bears, which had disappeared from the area for over 100 years, have now returned. Lynx, moose, red deer, and even wild horses also live there in large numbers. This land, once damaged by radiation, has become like a thriving nature park. Some scientists call it one of the best nature preserves in all of Europe, a true resurgence of wildlife. However, this wild paradise is not as simple as it looks. Animals are doing well not because the radiation is gone, but because humans are not there. There is no hunting, no farming, and no big factories to bother them. For large animals, the absence of people seems to be a bigger benefit than the harm caused by low levels of radiation. Still, scientists have seen some quiet problems. Birds have developed cataracts which make their eyes cloudy. Frogs in the area have changed, evolving darker skin. These small genetic mutations show that radiation still affects life in the zone, creating an unintended laboratory for nature's adaptation. This area is a strange place where nature and invisible radiation live together in a difficult balance.
On the surface, the exclusion zone looks peaceful and full of wildlife. But at its very center, the decaying monster of reactor number 4 still slumbers. The huge new concrete and steel arch covers it, but the deadly radioactive materials inside are still there, waiting quietly beneath. The zone seems calm, but the danger from the past persists, a silent threat at the heart of the empty city. The end and the future. After the terrible accident, a temporary concrete cover was quickly built over reactor number 4. This was called the sarcophagus. It was meant to stop more radiation from escaping. However, everyone knew it was only a temporary fix. It was built fast, but it could only last for 20 to 30 years.
Inside, it held a dangerous mix of radioactive lava-like material and dust, about 200 tons in total. This deadly material would stay dangerous for thousands of years. So a much bigger and stronger solution was needed. This became the new Safe Confinement, or NSC. It is a huge arch-shaped steel building, taller than a big cathedral. Its main goal is to contain the reactor's remains for the next 100 years, protecting the world. Building the NSC was a massive engineering challenge. To keep workers safe, the arch was built far away from the reactor. Then, in November 2016, huge machines slowly slid this giant structure over the old sarcophagus. This careful process took 15 days to complete.
Chernobyl's disaster changed the world in many ways. It showed the Soviet Union's flaws and secrecy, making people lose trust in their government. The huge cleanup costs also weakened the country. Many historians believe Chernobyl helped speed up the end of the Soviet Union. The accident also started new environmental groups and made people question nuclear power. Today, there's a paradox. Nuclear energy creates power without carbon, which is good for climate change. But the memory of Chernobyl still makes many people worry about its safety. We must remember the heroes. Around 600,000 people called liquidators worked bravely to clean up the site. They were soldiers, miners, and firefighters. Their great sacrifice helped save Europe from much worse contamination. Many suffered from radiation sickness because of their efforts. The city of Pripyat remains empty. Its famous Ferris wheel, which was never used, stands still as a silent monument to human error. The reactor's melted fuel will be dangerous for centuries. The new safe confinement is a wonderful achievement, but 100 years is a short time compared to the long-lasting danger. Chernobyl teaches us about the huge consequences of mistakes and the importance of honesty and safety with powerful technologies. It shows us that some problems, once started, can never be truly finished in our lifetime. What do you think is the most important lesson humanity learned from Chernobyl?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.